to the Bean Ninjas podcast, where you get an all-access pass to see what happens behind the closed doors of a fast-growing global bookkeeping and financial reporting business.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bean Ninjas podcast. And today we're joined by Brian Casel. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Meryl. How's it going?
Yeah, great. It's really good to be chatting with you. I know I have spoken with you a number of times also on your podcast and used one of your Productized Services audience ops. And so it's great to have you on the Bean Ninjas podcast. There's so many different things I want to chat with you about. But why don't we start with a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, sure. As always, great to connect with you. I've always been impressed with what you've built with Bean Ninjas for sure. It's one of the I really think it's like one of the great productized service businesses out there. It's a really good example of that for sure. I don't know how far back you want to go here, but I started out my career as a web designer. I worked at a web design agency and then went out as a freelance web designer for a couple of years. And then that sort of morphed into a couple different products and product businesses. And the running theme on most of the major businesses that I've been involved in the last few years has been productized services, mixing between SaaS and productized services. And then I do some teaching and I have a course and I do some podcasting. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the map, basically.
and learning coding in recent years. I always wonder how you fit it all in.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the latest thing for me from 2018 up till now, 2019. I've been really spending the bulk of my time learning to code. I've always been a front end designer developer, so HTML, CSS, little JavaScript. That's always been no problem for me. But it wasn't until 2018 that I started to learn backend development. So I've been learning Ruby on Rails, and I'm not very good, but I'm actually capable of designing and building and launching a full application. I'm kind of slow at it, but I could actually do it. Whereas before, I could design it and make some templates, but then I would have to, hire a developer or someone. So I'm happy to say that I don't fully rely on having to hire developers anymore.
Yeah, well, I'd like to dig into that a little bit later in the podcast, because I think that's an interesting story in itself, the way that you were able, firstly, to free up time to be able to devote the time to learn a new skill like that. And I have some other questions around that. But I want to go back into that transition of yours. So you talked about doing freelance web design and then going into productized services. And what sparked you to, or I know there's a lot of challenges that many freelancers face with running that style of business. And how did you manage to make that transition to a productized service?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was so direct or overnight. It was definitely, I was a freelance web designer, the typical thing, kind of working project to project. I had my own clients, and sometimes I hired other freelancers and formed, collectives on different projects. And that worked fine for a couple of years there. But I started to run into a lot of the same frustrations that a lot of freelancers and consultants do, whether it's, dealing with some clients who aren't so great to deal with, or, writing all those long proposals and, only winning some of them, and just getting burnt out and feeling like I can't step away from my computer without, taking a pay cut, basically, because all of my projects relied on myself to be there and do the work or get the work or things like that. And so I started, transitioning into doing products. Did a few like digital products here and there, but none of those were really significant enough to fully replace my income as a freelancer. But it wasn't until I really started to embrace the idea of a productized service that I was able to move that needle and eventually let productized service income start to fully replace my income as a freelancer. And then I started using that to leverage that and like build businesses that, one that I was able to then sell and then, move on to another one and sort of like stair step my way up till today. But going back to that transition, I mean, the main transition period, I think, was when I got into a business called Restaurant Engine. So I had been a freelance web designer. I was doing a lot of work with WordPress, and I wanted to build a SaaS, like a software as a service business. And for me, as a WordPress person, that the easiest entryway to that, I thought, would be to build a hosted WordPress website service where clients would come and sign up for an account and have their website automatically created, and then they can log in and customize their own site and pay month to month to have it hosted and managed through this service, and then I can magically step away and it would be amazing. But unfortunately, what I learned was, most of those customers didn't want to set it up themselves. They didn't have the time. They didn't have the expertise. And I was focusing on restaurants and hotels as the target industry for that. And so I started like offering like a done for you, like, well, if I just set up the website for you on this platform, will you stay on? And that definitely was the case. And then I started charging for that setup service. Then I made that setup service required. And then I hired a customer support team to do that setup service instead of me. And so that ultimately made it so that like the team was just onboarding clients, setting up doing this done for you website service, doing the done for you website updates. And it was recurring revenue. It was growing. And I started really removing myself, not only from the service side of things, but also from the sales and then from the marketing, the content marketing and all of that. And that business grew over a couple of years, and I was able to actually sell it in 2015, at which point I started my current business, Audience Ops, which was also a productized service. And I mean, we can get into that, but that was really that Restaurant Engine business, which I started around 2011, 2012, and then sold in 2015. I mean, that was that bridge for me that, from going from like freelance web designer to building a brand or a product that could actually grow and scale. And I was able to remove myself and ultimately sell it to a new owner.
That's a great story. And it's interesting to know that time period as well. So it sounds like it took about 3 years from you starting on that business and then exited about 3 years later, having almost removed yourself from the business over that period with customer support, sales, and building a brand. And
yeah, about three to 4 years. Some of that was sort of developing it. Yep.
And what inspired you to sell that business, or what was your motivation?
At the time, so we're getting into 2015. That entire business was completely focused on selling to the restaurant industry and the hotel industry. And to be honest, I didn't really have that personal connection at all to those people. And so it just felt a little disconnected from everything else that I was involved in. And I at that time I had started building up a network of other founders, software people, agencies, consultants, freelancers, and people just working in digital products in one form or another. And I had started selling my course called Productized to those people. And I just felt more connected to those people and less connected to the restaurant industry. And so it just seemed like it would make more sense to sell that business, take, a couple of years worth of profit from it, and then use that to, actually I used most of that money to buy a house, but it also like gave me the freedom to take a few months and start up my next business. So,
and did you already have the idea for your next business before you were? In fact, I imagine as an entrepreneur, you probably have lots of ideas, and seeing all of the different projects you work on, how did you decide on what your next business was going to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there was a period there, like for about 4 months or so in 2015, where I knew that Restaurant Engine was selling, like it was in the process of we had a contract and was going through due diligence. I knew that there was a closing date coming up, and I was very much not certain of what my next business was going to be. I did have like 3 or 4 different business ideas that I was kicking around. And so most of those were software ideas, like SaaS business ideas. And I was researching those. I was sort of testing them out a little bit. But the conclusion that I came to at that time was, to launch a software business, I would need at least a year of time to just develop the product, just to have it built and all that, and maybe get a couple of first customers paying a little bit of money, but 1 year and it wouldn't even come close to replacing the income that I had from Restaurant Engine. Like, that just wasn't sustainable. And I mean, the exit from Restaurant Engine, like, it was more money than I had seen before that, but it wasn't life-changing money. Like, I definitely had to replace that income somehow. And like I said, I put a lot of it into savings, and my family moved into a house and everything. I didn't want to just burn all of that cash on just, starting up a software business. And so the conclusion I came to was like, I need a business model that will get me to revenue much faster than building up a SaaS. And so the idea of audience ops was one of those ideas that I was kicking around, and it ultimately was the most attractive because it's a productized service, didn't require building any software. I could pitch it to people in my network that I was already connected to, other software founders and people like that. And within 30 days, I was able to land the first couple of customers for it. It's recurring revenue. It's a higher price point than a typical SaaS because it is a done for you, blog content service. So, in that sense, it was just a lot faster to build up that revenue. And I mean, it was actually just a matter of months, like 6 months or something like that, to where it surpassed the monthly recurring revenue from my previous business that I had been working on for like 4 years. So that one, audience ops in that first year, 2015 into 2016, it really grew pretty fast.
And I think it's interesting because you'd already had a productized service, so you would have learned a lot of lessons along the way. And then starting a second one, how did you go about building it and hiring your team? So you would have identified what you were selling, which was the done-for-you content. Who were your first couple of hires?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things with the idea to start Audience Ops was that I knew, or sort of like to justify it to myself of like why I should start this business, it would be like, I definitely don't want to be the one writing the content. Like I did not set out to start a new consulting service where I'm the one doing the work. I had done that before with web design. So I knew that no matter what, like from day one, I would need to hire writers. And I think I hired maybe 2 freelance writers as my first hires from day one, or probably around the same week or 2 that I landed those first customers. And then we, what I advise people with productized services is that you don't need to like figure out the entire process and all the details ahead of time. That's the beauty of it, is that you can literally just focus on the value proposition and the price point and who you want to sell it to. Focus on that first, land those customers, and then just start delivering the service. It might not be so efficient at first, but you can just sort of figure that out as you deliver to those very first customers. And that's what we did with the writers. We figured out everything from how long does it take to produce one article, and how much lead time do we need to build into our production schedule, and what are the exact deliverables that we should be including for clients in these packages, and what are the questions that clients have, and all of that. So we did that with a couple of freelancers, and then pretty soon into it, we hired an assistant, like a virtual assistant, to help with some of the little things like setting up blog posts and WordPress and email newsletters and stuff like that. And I remember a point, it was probably around 3 months in, where we probably had like 5 or 7 or 8 clients by that point. and plenty of demand, but I had to pause all new sales and just stop and continue to serve the early batch of clients. But then we took about 2 more months to just stop and really organize our processes. Like, okay, like everything that we've learned in those first couple of months, let's organize it into a better client onboarding process and the week-to-week production schedule, and get our processes documented and everything. And I think I had hired a project manager by that point. So then, 4 or 5 months in, we were able to unpause sales and have all this capacity and the systems in place to keep growing from there.
And I think one of the challenges that a lot of freelancers face when they change that mindset to growing a business is the cash flow or being able to hire ahead. So when you're a freelancer and it's just you, every hour that you work or project that you work on, that money is going directly to you. Whereas if you're hiring skilled staff, then all of a sudden you might need to actually take a pay cut, or it impacts the money that's going to your bank account. So how did you manage that as you were building your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a few things. I mean, number one, the pricing, the way the billing works on Audience Ops is that everything is paid up front by the client. They pay either monthly or quarterly subscriptions. And so basically that helps with cash flow because the revenue comes in first, and then the team produces the content, and then I pay the team every 2 weeks, but it's after they deliver their deliverables. So the timing on that it helps. But the other thing that I learned pretty early on, like during that first year of Audience Ops, was like at first we paid everybody by the hour, like freelancers by the hour, and like two freelancers might be equally skilled, talented. They could produce more or less the same quality article, but one takes half as long as the other. And that makes costs pretty unpredictable. And so pretty soon into it, I learned that it's best if you keep those costs very standardized across the team. And so now every role in Audience Ops has basically a standard pay rate, and we pay per deliverable. So we literally know, like, for every client that's buying a package, that package includes X number of articles in a month. Like, we know the costs to produce a single article, and can figure out the profit margins and everything.
I can see that working well with something like writing a piece of content. What about with managers? So say project managers, what are their deliverables, or how do you structure that?
Yeah, it's actually kind of the same way. It's a little bit different though. So with managers, we pay them per client that they manage per month. And there are a couple of very like variants in there. Like, is the client onboarding, they get paid a little bit more for that first month? Does the client have, a higher plan or a lower plan? But still, those are like standard rate variations for the managers. And basically their role in Audience Ops is to be the person, basically be the point of contact for the client. So they kind of host the onboarding calls. They interface between receiving feedback from the client and then passing that along to the writers. Internally, they're making sure that the writers are delivering things on time, and then they're preparing the deliverables and sending them back to the clients. And like, they're just that go-between, handling those details. And then the nice thing is that removes, like, having these managers in place really removes a lot of the extra work that a typical freelance writer would have to do. Like, if you just hire a single writer, like, they're not just writing for you, they're also managing you as the client, right? So they're communicating, they're fielding replies, they're doing the sales and the onboarding and all that. With Audience Ops, our writers can just focus on researching and writing. They do actually talk to the clients occasionally to like interview them about topics, but all of the management and the scheduling and all the, just like the detail oriented stuff of like organization, that's where the managers come in. And just like most of the roles, like managers actually are part-time in audience ops. And I mean, some of them they spend half or most of their week with us, but they too are like stay-at-home parents, or they're freelancers and they're doing other stuff outside of audience ops, and they just sort of check in day to day for 1, 2, maybe 2.5 hours to check in on their clients, check all their emails, maybe handle a client call here and there. But yeah, it's sort of just like optimized that way.
We've found part-time staff work really well at B Ninjas too. We actually have some full-time, but quite a proportion of contractors and part-time staff, as you said, stay-at-home parents and people that may only want to work a couple of hours a day. I was surprised, actually. There's some really high-quality people who are only wanting to work or not wanting to work a full work week.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I've been amazed at that, and really just that's the thing that I love the most about audience ops is the team. I mean, they are really talented people who maybe they've come from corporate jobs and they just don't want that anymore. And yeah, like they're stay-at-home parents, or they just want to do personal projects like freelancing or starting their own business, and having something like audience ops or B Ninjas to be like that steady, reliable, good quality work to balance out the roller coaster stuff of freelancing. I mean, that's really good.
So let's look at where you were after 12 months with audience ops. If you can remember, about how many hours would you have been working in that business?
Do you mean like in the beginning?
No, so when the business was 12 months old, because I know you've been able to gradually remove yourself, and so I'm just trying to just almost describe like a timeline for the audience of what that might have looked like.
Oh yeah, let's see. So like we're probably getting into 2016. Yeah, I mean that year I was probably still pretty heavily into it, but my role has always really been figuring out the processes and the details and hiring people, and then also doing the sales. But again, like not like by 2016, I definitely had managers in place. I think at that point we might have started to hire beyond the first manager that we had. Let's see. I mean, I did start to gain a little bit more freedom in 2016 from 2015. Like the business was very profitable that year too. So that made it easier to like take time off and do traveling. Actually, from 2015, actually the whole time that I was launching Audience Ops, like the first 8 months of it, I was actually traveling full time with my family. We were going from Airbnb to Airbnb throughout the US in a car with my 1-year-old at the time and our dog and everything. And we would like stop, we would live in a house for like 2 weeks, and I would get a bunch of work done on the business. And then we'd be like on the road for a week, and I wasn't really working much. And, yeah, it was kind of hectic, but kind of fun at the same time. But yeah, like 2016, like it started to back off a little bit. I mean, there would be times like throughout the business, 2016, 2017, where I would just put in a whole batch of effort, whether it's like a new marketing campaign or at one point we totally overhauled our client onboarding process. Things like that. Like I would put in a lot of work, but then sometimes work would really back off and I could start working on other projects.
And were you also working on your community and info product at the same time as you were working on audience ops, or did you have to put that on pause for a little while? How did you balance that?
Yeah, so like my main product there is called Productized. That's a course and a community all about productized services. Freelancers, consultants who are, forming a productized service and want to grow beyond their hourly billing type of work. I actually initially launched that at the end of 2014. So I was still working on Restaurant Engine at the time, but then I like updated the course in 2016, and then I did a very big update on it in 2018. the nice thing about that is that it's basically a passive income type of business, and it's a side business from everything else that I do. It's about, I don't know, 25% of my income, but it's significant, but it's not the main thing. But the nice thing about it is that it's passive. So it's like I can, hop into it for like 1 month out of a year and do a big update on it, and then let it just sort of like run the rest of the year while I focus on my primary business. There is a community with that, and I sort of drop in there as much as I can. It's not like super active, but it's we've got a nice group of a couple hundred people in there. And then occasionally I'll do some coaching calls through that, maybe a couple of those a month, which I enjoy doing that. But it's again, it's like a side thing. So.
Yeah. And so what does a work week look like these days? What proportion of your time are you spending on audience ops and then your other projects? And I think you have some other projects as well, or side businesses that you haven't mentioned. So do you want to have a chat about those?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if we move up the timeline a bit, and now we're getting to 2018, like all of last year of 2018, like my time investment in audience ops is very, very small. I mean, it's at the point for the past year, almost 2 years, that I'm only spending now about 2 hours per week in audience ops, doing a few sales calls and taking a couple of escalated questions from the team. But most of those are dealt with the managers and the team in place. It's been pretty steady and solid. So last year, 2018, I invested almost all of my time in learning to code. I think we touched on it briefly earlier. So yeah, like I had been a front end designer and developer, but I was always sort of frustrated with the fact that, like, if I have an idea for a software product, I hit this wall where after I design it, after I talk to customers about it, I would then either have to spend a bunch of cash on hiring a developer, or just wait until I have the cash available to do that. And then, sometimes I'm not even that satisfied with the outcome with working with developers. So, like I felt like as a product designer, I really wanted to be able to at least design the full stack for like a version 1, like a minimum viable product, if you will. So I invested all my time last year in learning Ruby on Rails, and went through a bunch of courses. I worked with a coach, did a bunch of practice projects and whatnot. And about 8 or 10 months into that journey, I was able to start building real products with it. So a couple of months ago, I started this it's a very small app called Sunrise KPI, and it's at sunrisekpi.com. Basically, I just wanted for myself a tool that I can connect all my different services to, like my metrics, and get a daily email to tell me all my numbers, my KPIs. So, you can connect your Google Analytics, your Stripe, your MailChimp or Drip or ConvertKit or your Twitter, a bunch of other services to it. You can connect a spreadsheet to it, and it'll get all of your numbers and just send you an automated email with your numbers. And that's what I wanted for myself. So I used that as like a good practice learning project, but also launched it as a real product a couple of weeks ago. That was one. And then the bigger project that I'm really sinking into right now is called Process Kit. And that will be a software product for creating processes and managing all of your repeatable projects, which, obviously falls pretty much in line with what I've been talking about with productized services. So if your business has repeatable, lots of repeatable work, whether you're doing bookkeeping or or websites or podcast production or anything like that, you can create processes or workflows and then attach those to projects that repeat. And the software will automatically assign the right people, automatically calculate the due dates, and do some other automation stuff with your team, and really try to make your business and projects run more predictably, and rather than having all this sort of like chaos that happens when when you reach those edge cases and things kind of go off the rails. And so I've been designing that and and I've got an early access group for Process Kit going, and we're recording this here in February. I'm hoping by May or so to have a first version of that ready for users to use, and I'm going to try to spend most of this year focused on that.
When you originally, or when I heard the product name, Process Kit, I originally thought it was going to be something like a suite process type tool where you documented your processes. But hearing you describe that more, it sounds like a workflow tool where you assign to. Is it more like a Trello or a project management tool that helps you productized service type businesses with recurring tasks?
Yeah, it's actually a kind of a merger of the two, if you will. It is very much a place where you can document your processes, but the processes are, like you said, like more like workflows. So there would be steps that can have decision points, or steps that send off a template email to a client and they have to click approve, and then it comes back into Process Kit. But the main thing that I've seen, the main pain point really that I've seen in our business and from talking to other businesses is that, your projects happen in one place, whether it's Trello or Basecamp or Asana, and your documented processes, your SOPs, tend to be stored somewhere else, whether it's like a process tool or Google Docs or something. And they're sort of in these silos. And so the team doesn't really have the instructions at their fingertips, like in the same place where they're tracking and working on the projects. And so with Process Kit, it will be both a place to organize your repeatable projects and a place to manage your processes, and your processes get attached to those projects. And you can do that automatically. So, if you have a new bookkeeping project, it automatically gets the bookkeeping process.
That makes sense. We actually have that pain point in our business because we have a place where we store all of our standard operating procedures, and we use Suite Process. And then we have a different workflow system called Right, which is the step-by-step and the tasks and checklists of how it actually works. So we have that, exact situation.
Yeah, I mean, with us, it's been similar. Like we sort of track articles that go through our production line using Trello, but then our very detailed SOPs are in Google Docs, and we sort of like have like a template Trello card that we're supposed to duplicate, but then we automatically archive it, and people lose their place, and it's kind of a mess. But yeah, and I mean, really, I think so there's that, but I think there's more automation that can be built in when you have like a dedicated tool. Like if it's I like, for example, I don't know if this is how it works in your business, but if you have like a client who's using Xero versus a client who's using QuickBooks, the process can have that variation built in. So it's like if A or if B, then use these steps instead of these steps, and that sort of thing.
Nice example. Ryan's asked me a few times when Bean Ninjas is starting with QuickBooks.
Right.
So I wanted to steer the conversation now into a couple of concepts, one around productivity and then also around finishing, because someone could look at all that you produce and think, gee, does Brian work an 80-hour work week? You get so much done. And so first of all, I wanted to ask about your approach to making sure that you finish tasks. And then I've got some questions around how you structure your work week. Let's start with the first one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like I get asked that question a lot from people, but I honestly don't work more than like 35 hours. Some weeks like 40 hours a week. Like I'm not working crazy hours, to be honest. I've got little kids at home, I try to hang out with them but I work like a normal work week. I think one of the big advantages of it is having a business, audience ops, that basically pays for my time, but frees me up. I'm literally only spending 2 hours a week, if even that, most weeks. So I have all those hours, and my salary is covered from that business. So, I know that a lot of freelancers and people working in a job, like they sort of have to, bootstrap on nights and weekends. And I've been there. I spent years doing that. And that's that is what's sort of required in a lot of cases. But as you start to level up and stair step from one business to the next, like I feel pretty lucky that in the last year or two, I've finally been able to get to a point where I have, I actually just wrote about this last week, where I feel like I have this space to breathe, to actually work on creating and learning and just exploring different ideas day to day while I have a pretty steady income coming from somewhere else. I feel like that should be the goal for a lot of people. If your goal is to get to doing, different products. I mean, in terms of productivity or like my day to day, like I wake up, I'm up pretty early. But most weekdays, I mean, I get my kids up and I drive them to school. And I'll have my bulletproof coffee in the morning, and then I'm working in my office probably by around 9 or so. I take my kids around 8:30, and then I'm in here by 9.
And are you working from a home office, or are you working at a space somewhere else?
Yeah, I have a home office, which I really enjoy, but I get a little bit sick of my house. So 3 or 4 days a week, I'll go out to the coffee shop and take my laptop for about 3 hours just to get out. But most of the work that I do happens here in the office.
Yeah. And do you have any trouble managing distractions when you're at home, or it sounds like your kids are off to school during the day, so you would have uninterrupted time?
Well, they're still pretty young. I mean, they're 2 and 4, so there's a few hours in the morning where they're out, but most of the day they're actually at home and making all sorts of noise in the next room. So that's usually when I head out to the coffee shop. Well, that and my Bose noise canceling headphones help a lot too.
I'll be managing this in a month or two. Our daughter's due in 6 weeks, so they're not balancing the work and work and life too. So.
Yep, you'll learn. It's like survival mode there for a while.
Well, wonderful. It's been so great talking with you, Brian. I know we've covered a range of different topics, and I've got a lot of admiration for the work that you do, audience ops, but also the way that you've freed yourself up, created processes, and have these other side businesses as well. So it's been great talking with you.
Yeah, Meryl, thanks for having me on.
And if the audience wanted to get in touch, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I mean, my website is briancasel.com. I've got some articles and things on there, but mainly it's my newsletter. That's where I write and send like really the most honest and up-to-date updates. It's stuff that I don't publish publicly. I try to send that newsletter every Saturday, and that's available at briancasel.com. And I'm sort of active on Twitter at CastJam.
Right. Well, thanks again, Brian, and let's stay in touch.